Good afternoon, and welcome to the first installment of the Cybersecurity Hour with Adams and Reese. This is a four-part series, kind of celebrating Cybersecurity Month, which is, as you know, October. So this is the first installment. The whole series is going to be fantastic. You know, my mind is gets kind of sideways sometimes, so I can't tell you the exact link to register for all of them, but I will post it on LinkedIn, or you can shoot me a direct message and I'll get that link to you. Or you can go to Adams and Reese, which is at www.arlaw.com, and you can find the link there. Again, welcome to this first installment. Today we've got a really neat topic that we're going to discuss. We are going to talk about diversity in technology. With things that are going on in society right now, in the country, in the world, diversity and inclusion are front and center. But for us on this call, diversity in technology and the technology area holds a special place for us because we, for the most part, all work in the technology area. So today we've got, two fabulous people that are really going to help guide us through this conversation and talk with us and really give us their candid thoughts and assessments on diversity and technology and what we can do to increase diversity in technology. We're going to try to identify some of the problems, and we're going to try, best we can to talk about some of the solutions. Now, for you that are listening, one of the things that we have is the question box. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in there. We will get to those. We will, ask our panelists those questions to get their thoughts on them. So with that said, we're talking about the panelists. Who are they? First, we've got Marilyn Jackson, who is the CEO of UnderGrid Networks. Marilyn and I have known each other for a long time. I'm not going to introduce Marilyn fully because I'm going to let her talk a little bit about herself, what she's done, what her background is, and what makes her uniquely qualified to be on this call today and this topic. Second, we've got Gary Brantley, who will be, coming on the screen shortly, but he's on the line with us. Gary is the Chief Information Officer for the City of Atlanta. The City of Atlanta, as you know, is really at the forefront, or you should know, is at the forefront of smart cities, smart city technologies, and really helping to bridge that gap between technology and how you make it useful to the populace. So Gary's bringing a very unique perspective. But most importantly, both of our panelists today have really been involved in diversity efforts and increasing diversity in technology. So with that long-winded, short introduction, I'm going to ask Marilyn to just introduce herself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do now, UnderGrid Networks, and kind of some of the things that you have done. I know you've done a lot with respect to women in technology. And so I think I would love to have a refresher on it, and surely our audience would love to hear more about you. So Marilyn, take it away.
Thank you, Roy. Yes, I'm Marilyn Jackson, CEO of UnderGrid Networks, and we focus on all things connectivity. That includes a huge data stack, technology stack that incorporates artificial intelligence solutions. We focus on 5G, and we do things in the extended reality space, which incorporates augmented and virtual reality. So we're very much on the leading edge in terms of our products and solutions. And I guess a little bit about me is I have been in this industry for a very long time. I have worked my way from being an engineer to a sales executive in some of the very largest companies, and have architected and engineered some of the biggest networks around the globe. So I've seen a lot of change, a lot of cycles inside of this industry, and have dealt with diversity from day one. It's been a very interesting ride, and I'm sure that I can share a number of various, I guess, scenarios and inputs that can help us with the conversation.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Marilyn. Gary, would love to learn a little bit more about you and your journey to where you are right now as the Chief Information Officer for the City of Atlanta.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about the camera issues I'm having. Please forgive me. And Roy, I actually put on a button-up shirt and a suit jacket for you.
Got ready for me, huh?
Yeah, and I'm quite disappointed that I haven't been able to figure this out. But you know, long story short, Chief Information Officer for the City of Atlanta. I've been CIO for quite some time. You know, going on almost 20 years or so. I've been doing this, and so you know, of course, we have a large footprint. We service the largest airport in the U.S., the busiest airport in the U.S., actually the world. If I have my statistics right, but 20 to 21 different city departments are under my purview from a technological side of things. So, you know, we're really as many of you all may or may not know, really starting to move forward because of a lot of the work we've been able to do with you, Roy, especially from one of the largest cyber attacks that we had. And it was probably one of the largest in U.S. history. And so we've really been able to turn the page with that. And that's been the majority of my work for almost the last 2 years, is really setting the foundation for the city, making sure I'm getting the right people here and that we're putting in systems and processes that actually will outlive you know, my leadership and my tenure, and really try to stabilize and prepare the city for the future.
Fantastic. Now, before the city, I know you were CIO for DeKalb County Schools, so you know, kind of bring a little educational perspective to this conversation also, right?
Absolutely. And if you're not from Atlanta, you know, DeKalb is a pretty large school district. I think it was rated when I left, it was the 26th largest school district in the U.S. So, you know, a couple 100,000 students and a large amount of employees. And so that is, you know, I bring that perspective as well. I also work for two private companies, MCI WorldCom, if you would be old enough to remember that, and also started my career with IBM.
Fantastic. I didn't realize you worked for MCI. I worked for MCI way back in the day too, back when, you know, we had rotary phones. So, you know, we'll have to catch up on that. So, question for you all. You know, one of the kind of statistics I threw out there when we were, you know, talking about this whole thing and what we're talking about today is that when you ask young girls and young boys, and let me frame this conversation, because I want to go from you know, young people all the way through adults and all the way through executive leadership in the technology area. So you know, my hope is to really span the horizon. And based on that, we're going to start with when young girls are asked to draw a scientist or somebody in the technology area, they will draw a man 2 times more often than they draw a female. Now, if you ask a boy, they most always draw a man when you start trying to draw a scientist. Why do you think that is? What is going on there? Marilyn, what do you think's going on there?
Well, clearly it's conditioning. I mean, that's an age-old problem that we've had for a number of years. And again, because they don't see people like me in, being promoted and marketed, et cetera, that's the image that they often walk away with. The majority of my peers, especially those that are still in technical roles and engineering roles, they don't quest for the limelight. Right? They're busy doing the work and they love what they're doing. So unfortunately, young girls don't get to see those that are truly doing a lot of the what we call the deep tech or the engineering work. There are some organizations that are trying to address the issue. Career Girls is a big one based out of California. They are trying to put more images out to young girls to say there are people that look like you and me doing these kind of things to trying to change that perception. But it's all about exposure, and it's all about the conditioning that we continue to push on to young girls.
Right. And I know Hidden Figures, which was a movie about African American, you know, mathematicians at NASA. was one of my favorite movies because it kind of highlighted what you said. It brought you know, females to the front and center in very crucial roles, you know, in the space program. And you know, for those hidden figures that were at NASA, I'm sure there were thousands more that just never got the exposure out there. So, you know, it's just interesting, you know, that you would say that. Now, Gary, I'm going to throw another statistic out at you, and that is, if I said to you that, you know, according to some statistics, minorities comprise about 30% of the US population. And when I say minorities, African American, Hispanic, but only make up about 14% of master's students and just 6% of all PhD students. Would that surprise you?
No, not at all. It doesn't surprise me at all. I can actually remember, and DeKalb is a very diverse school district. It's a school district that has about 96 different languages tied to it. And so one of the things, and quite honestly, where I had no idea that there were even 96 languages out there. I had to Google it, and I believe it was 147 different types of languages, but it's a huge melting pot for the Southeast. And so I remember going into a large auditorium as a CIO and asking every single student in there at one time, do you know what a chief information officer is? And none of them knew what it was. I think maybe 6 out of 1,500 students said yes. And that was very, very concerning for me when you really started to understand and look at that, especially with the age that we're moving into as it relates to technology. So that does not surprise me one bit.
Right. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, in the law, I'll go out as a lawyer, I'll go out to schools and, you know, you go to some schools and you say, I'm a lawyer, and immediately they think of corporate, you know, oh, wow, you know, you're a corporate lawyer, blah, blah, blah. You go to some schools and, you know, their concept of a lawyer is either somebody that can get you out of jail or somebody that's going to deal with your personal injury lawsuit. And, you know, not that there's anything wrong with those, but that's, you know, how a large segment of the population, particularly in minority areas, have been conditioned to think about the law. You know, it's either in the criminal sense or it is in the personal injury sense, and not in the corporate sense, and definitely not in the technology sense, you know, cybersecurity or anything like that. So, you know, you're right on. So let me ask you all this. Okay, given all of that, and given some of the things that we're going to talk about, you know, we're going to talk about STEM and STEAM and the importance of those. But, you know, what do you think the overriding problem is here in technology and increasing diversity in technology? And then I'm going to ask you, not right now, but, you know, kind of what are some real world solutions that we can start to do, particularly when we start talking about senior leadership in corporate America, to start to increase in diversity in technology? So Marilyn, what do you think the biggest overriding problem is here? Or is it that simple? Am I being too simplistic in my question and in my analysis behind that question?
No, I think there's a very simple solution. You can't be what you can't see. So I think exposure is the key.
Okay.
I would tell you that I volunteer with Grace Hopper, the Grace Hopper Company, as well as some things with Anita Borg, and I see what they do on the West Coast in terms of their both elementary and middle school, as well as high school students. Those kids are very much exposed at an early age to a lot of that will push them in the direction of technology. We don't get that so much in this part of the country, and it's simply because I think maybe geography of the headquarters of the larger tech companies. There are a lot of different things that don't allow that same level of exposure to happen on this particular coast, because our jobs are more operational in nature. So I think that exposure is everything. I know it worked for me. I grew up in the inner city of Birmingham. I wanted to be a journalist. That was my goal in life, to go to college and do the local news. But I got exposed to what we call the Minorities Introduction to Engineering program down at Auburn University. And I went down there for a summer, and that gave me exposure to the whole world of engineering, something I had never heard about. I didn't know what an engineer was, or I didn't know anyone who was an engineer. So that little bit of exposure really did change my trajectory and led me to go on and do electrical engineering studies. So I think that the more you expose a child to opportunities, and I'm not talking just STEM opportunities, I'm just saying overall, the more you're going to plant the seed of direction in terms of what they choose to do in life.
Oh, fantastic. Now, how old were you when you went to that Auburn program?
I was a junior in high school.
Okay. Now, do you think, obviously it wasn't too late for you because you went on to become an engineer. Do you think those things should start earlier, or is that kind of a prime time in a student's life?
I think it's prime time because, again, I think there are some foundational elements that are just inherent to a person's composition, and a lot of times you don't really figure out what those are until you're a little bit older. And I'm thinking maybe in your early to late teenage years, do you really begin to understand that you have an innate ability to do X, Y, and Z? And so once you understand, because not everybody can be literal and lateral, some people are more creative, and so you have to really understand who you are as a person, and those things start forming. I think in your puberty years, you begin to understand that you like numbers more than you like symbols, or you like people more than you don't like people, etc. Because all those factors are critical in terms of the career that you choose. And so pushing of someone who has more of a creative gene and more of a person gene into programming would be a huge mistake, because they need people. They need to interact with someone other than just the computer, right? So you have to look at all those elements, and I do think that you start picking up on those things when you are in your teen years. I think those are great years to start getting that exposure.
Fantastic. Gary, what about you? Again, you've got the benefit of that educational background and working with the DeKalb County schools. What do you think, kind of big picture, the issue is, or the issues are, with respect to increasing diversity in technology?
Yeah, I actually do think exposure is key, and I promise you, if I would have went first, that would have been the first thing that I said. So I'm gonna take it from a different angle. I also think we need to really concentrate, especially in the inner city, more around getting our youth involved. And I know we do it through STEM and STEAM, but we really have to get them involved in mathematics and sciences. Those are, when you start to look at even the entry types of tests that allow you to move on to even educational institutions and things that you have to do that requires you to even get your foot in the game. You have to be very knowledgeable about those areas, and so we have to continue to make math fun. We have to continue to make science fun, because if you don't, in some cases, it can become extremely boring. You can't program or write code if you don't understand the basic foundations of math. And so if then statements are extremely important. I used to code. Algebraic expressions are extremely important. You have to know those areas in order for you to be effective. And so, you can ask someone, hey, do you want to code? I hear a lot of kids say, I want to be both females and males. I want to make video games.
Right.
Well, in some cases, you have to understand what lies beneath that and how you get to that point. So you can be extremely excited and receive the exposure, but not necessarily be well prepared to take that on. And we used to have this funny, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, we used to have this funny thing in college when I was going through my computer science programs, where we had the C and C++ courses, right? You were taking these easy classes all the way through Visual Basic, COBOL, which doesn't exist anymore, and you got to C, and that was the game breaker. Everybody that wanted to be in technology just dispersed. And if you looked at it, a lot of them were African Americans. And so when you went to go back and look, all my friends were gone, and it was because that's when the math kicked in. And that's when the sciences kicked in. Although they were extremely interested in it, they were not interested in taking on the rigor of things that they, in some cases, struggled with. And so
Right.
I think that's where we need to really focus our attention. We need to continue to come up with creative ways on how to teach, mathematics to a lot of our population.
Great answers, great answers. Now, you all both mentioned something, and so I'm gonna take one little piece of what you said and expand on it, and throw a statistic out there for you. If I told you that over 80% of technology executives are white, let me get my statistic right. Yeah, over 80% of technology executives are white, non-minority. How would you react to that? Gary, what would be your first reaction to that, gut reaction?
Well, I would actually say from the time I started, it's gotten a little bit better. That's the first thing, but that's horrible in my opinion. I mean, that's not a very good statistic, and I think we still have a lot of work to do in order, and that really goes back to the exposure that I was talking about. This would be, I'm around the age where, the executive interest would be there, and the actual background and level and years and level of experience would be there. So what's end up happening is, if you go back to when I started, the exposure was not there. So then in the tech field, you have a low level of executives, because back then, if you go back years ago, we just weren't that including minorities in general in that. And I think as we start to move further down the path and see what the real effects of the STEAM and the STEM programs have, whenever those like years started, I would really like to see the difference in that percentage, when we can go from the time we started to really focus on STEM up until when those individuals will become executives, if there will be a mass change in that, because it'll be more people who were involved in that from the beginning.
Marilyn, your thoughts on that statistic? That was great insight, Gary. And and I'll dig up those statistics to see how things have changed over the years because of the STEAM and STEM programs. Unfortunately, I don't think it has changed as much as we would have liked for it to have changed, just given the numbers that are still there, especially in the upper ranks. When you start talking about technology companies and upper ranks in the technology areas in major corporate, entities here in the United States. Marilyn, how would that statistic strike you?
Yeah, the statistic doesn't surprise me. I would say that it's probably a little bit false in terms of the perception that that's the only option that we have in terms of selection. Because I would tell you that I have a lot of peers who have STEM education, who have technology experience, but they attrition out, and they attrition for a number of different reasons. Because and when I speak from a woman's perspective, we take time for our families, we take time for ourselves, we do a lot of things along the path that allow us to attrition out. And a lot of times we attrition not necessarily to C-level roles or technical roles. We'll attrition to HR, we'll attrition to maybe marketing or sales or something of that nature. And so what happens is, when you look at the promotion path inside, especially these large companies, these large technical companies, those promotion paths don't come from HR and marketing. They often come from the technical ranks or from maybe even the sales ranks. So you don't, because we are taking a different direction, a different path per se, or we're doing different things in along our journey, we don't get that selection criteria a lot of times, because it's a huge sacrifice that you have to make the higher you go.
Now, let me ask you this. I'm gonna challenge you here a little bit. Do you think that that alternative path, let's just say to HR or marketing, away from sales or finance or technology, is that by choice, or is it just that the system is set up that if you want to spend more time with your family, if you want to do other things, you just are almost necessarily kind of excluded or weeded out from those areas, which then are the pathways to the upper ranks? Or do you think it's a little bit of both?
Well, I'm going to say until recently, it has been by choice. And that choice has not always been a positive choice, because tech is a very competitive, it's a very hard field. The culture is very, very, very difficult. And so for women, a lot of times we have to deal with a lot of different things that allowed us to succeed in that particular culture. And so I think that the choice is the attrition is by choice, to no longer have to deal with the culture that that has been established inside of the tech world. It's gotten a little better, but it's still, like I said, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I would tell you that the complaints that we had 30 years ago, young girls are still having those same complaints, because the culture that we have allowed to build and the culture that we mimic is very, very harsh.
Great thoughts. Now, Gary, kind of following on what Marilyn said, you lead a very large technology organization at AIM, the Atlanta Information Management Team for the city of Atlanta. But now, you have a very diverse team, and in terms of racial diversity, but also in terms of gender diversity. I know your CTO, your Chief Technology Officer, is female, and you have a lot of senior managers that are female. What are some of the things that you're doing there, to kind of create, as Marilyn said, a better culture for minorities, for females at the city of Atlanta?
Yeah, that was a huge focus of mine, even going in, and I will tell you, the new CIO for DeKalb County School District who succeeded me as a woman, and so an African American woman, and so one of the things that has been a huge focus is to really have a workforce that makes inclusive decisions. So I don't make these decisions on my own, but I try to bring in open-minded people who can really look for talent levels out there that can really help the environment that I'm in. And to their credit, a lot has been around women, and African American women who, like you said before, the Chief Technology Officer is the first woman. And then if you move into African American woman that the city has ever had. And by far, I think she's, and this isn't me throwing favors, but the best by far. And I think that it just goes to show you, I think our decisions, because our workforce is very inclusive and we have different goals that we are trying to meet, I think it's made us a better department. And I think that we really try to go and focus on the Latino population, the Hispanic population. We really want to find talent that's out there, along with African Americans as well, of course, to really try to make this. We feel like this is what the city is made up of, and I really do feel like having the different perspectives on my team gives me the ability to make really great decisions. And so having seen that work across different organizations, I don't think, even if I was African American, that I still think that I would move that way, because I think organizations are a lot more well-rounded. And I've seen that when they focus on making sure they have complete diversity across, especially at senior leadership level.
Right. And
I don't know. I would disagree with that just a little bit.
Yeah, I was about to come to you, Marilyn. I see you kind of chomping there.
Yeah, think it may be true for the city of Atlanta, and kudos to you, Gary, for that. But I still deal with a lot of my peers who are now in the Fortune 100s, and I would tell you that is so far from a true statement. If you look across the ranks of the leadership of Amazon or Facebook, Google, et cetera, even our enterprise 100, 1,000 companies, you don't see faces like mine or people that are other than white male, honestly. So there is still, I think, Atlanta may be a microcosm and have a solution per se, and have put the right, candidates inside of, the qualified candidates based on just their abilities in these particular roles. But I still think overall we have a major problem in that we don't. It's just not. I mean, we're just not there.
So Marilyn, I've known you for a
Roy,
while.
Roy,
Yeah.
hold on for a second. The question was about what I was doing with the city of Atlanta. And so I want to make sure I correct that. The discussion point was you have a very diverse workforce. And what are you doing in order to make that come true? And so the question was not, what do you see with the world?
Right.
And so I
That's
do
fair.
think, and so I want to make sure I clear that up, because that definitely was not the question. What I do see across the world, and I've been in Fortune 500 companies. I was the regional operations manager for MCI WorldCom at a very young age. I had about 5 or 6 cities, and I was working in technology. And I can tell you, and I think I kind of said it before, you don't see that. You don't. I graduated from MIT with my master's. You don't see it. So I have a very wide perspective on what's going on as it relates to technology and African Americans. And Marilyn's right. It hasn't gotten better. It's not improving. But if we're specifically talking about what I've done since I've been in this role, it's been a concentrated effort to make sure that happens. And just because it's Atlanta doesn't necessarily mean that it happens. The city is extremely diverse. And I think people get mixed up and wrapped up at the fact that because Atlanta is considered what they call a black mecca, that just look downtown and look at the gentrification that's going on across the city of Atlanta. It's changing right before our eyes. So I don't want to get mixed up with people thinking that just because it's the city of Atlanta, which is a microcosm of the state of Georgia, that things are where they need to be. I was the first confirmed African American CIO for the city of Atlanta. Others were intern. The CIOs before me that were confirmed were not. So we still have work to do within the city of Atlanta too. So I just wanted to clear that up.
So great thoughts from both of you. So I'm going to ask you though, because I know you both, and you're both very thoughtful on this. If you were the CEO of a Fortune 100 company, and this issue, you were well aware of this issue, kind of as you are in your current roles, capacity, in your current selves, what are 5 steps or steps that you would affirmatively take? And Marilyn, I'm gonna start with you, but what are steps that you would affirmatively take to help to start to address this problem in your organization? You have the ultimate power. Let's say you're the CEO and chair of the board. You've got the power, you've got the throne. What are some concrete things that you would do to address this problem and to start to really make meaningful change in terms of creating more diversity in senior leadership, particularly in the technology areas? Marilyn?
I don't give you 5, but I'll give you the ones that came to top of mind.
Absolutely.
First, I would solely focus. I would begin by focusing strongly on culture. I think culture drives all other decisions. I think it's a tentacle into everything else that we're going to talk about. Because if you don't have the right culture, then you're not going to have the right supportive programs. You're not going to have the right people in the right places. I mean, there's just a lot of things that you're not going to have right if you're not focused on culture. It's a huge, I think it's a very important element that the culture be set from the very top. And then that culture is going to drive down initiatives. It's going to say, okay, general managers and VPs, I want this particular initiative or program to happen, and it's going to be a program that's going to perhaps trickle down again to the managers to say these are the things we're going to do. So I think that culture is the biggest conversation and the biggest start that you need to have. Secondly, I would say that as part of that trickle down, the kind of initiatives and programs that are in place aren't necessarily conducive to retention, because I think retention is a huge element in terms of tech. Because we change so fast as an industry, you may be an expert here tomorrow, and then technology has changed, and now you've got to retool and reskill and do something else. And so we don't put enough focus in that whole retention. We force, people to job hop or to skip companies in terms of keeping themselves, I guess, at the helm of things. So retention initiatives would be one of the things that I would suggest that would help in terms of not only improving our statistics, but it could also help with the personal development. The third one is accountability. I think that there's not a lot of accountability in terms of the things that we're required to do. Certifications are one thing, but I think that there has to be some accountability in terms of our numbers, right? Because again, being a corporate entity, or there's nothing to say that we have to do anything other than run our business and make it profitable. So some kind of accountability, whether that be to ourselves, to our stockholders, or whomever that account may be, we need to look at maybe what that could be, because that accountability, again, is going to be part of that trickle down effect of having the right culture.
Fantastic, great thoughts. And I particularly like the retention because I know here in the legal area, that's a big problem that we have, is you can get people here, but then we struggle in keeping them here in the legal field. And so I think that retention is an often overlooked area. So I hear you and I agree with you. Gary, you're the CEO of a Fortune 500. Well, I'm not gonna make you Fortune 500 when I let Marilyn be Fortune 100. So I'm gonna let you be Fortune 100 too. You're CEO of a Fortune 100 company. What would you do to help to change the culture, increase diversity, however you want to define it?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of areas that you could focus on. I think the first thing is you have to kind of shape and control the narrative that there's not African American or minority talent out there that exists. I think that's huge. I think people think that is the case. We just heard an example of that from a Fortune 500 or plus or whatever company of a CEO that just actually made that statement. And I think that exposure to different environments, a lot of times, if you go to, and I'll just use it as an example because I've sat at one, you go to a job fair at MIT, it is completely different than when you go to a job fair at Howard. Bottom line, it is completely different. And the reason I make those comments is because a lot of times we don't necessarily always go where the talent exists. And so just because someone's not at a top tier school like Stanford or whatever, I mean, some of the brightest minds are coming out of HBCUs, right? And so I think really having an intentional focus. So I talked about exposure, but really having an intentional, we have to be intentional about it, and the focus needs to be narrow. I think from a minority standpoint, we have so much catching up to do. There were so many areas where we were disadvantaged in really trying to get to the areas and points that we were at, that a lot of times it can't just continue to be equal across the board. I think we have to really focus on being extremely intentional about it. And Roy, when you take a look at organizations and things still aren't working, organizations like the NFL, for example, right, who have really tried to use metrics and data and give mandatory type of you have to interview African American or minority. You have to, that still hasn't worked. And so I think that, just complete exposure. I think there's a lot of ignorance. And so, when you start to look at ignorance around different areas, that can be changed as it relates to mindset. I think that's extremely important. So I think really focusing on my team, putting a focus on my team to really expose them to different environments that they weren't necessarily exposed to, I think is because you have a lot of misnomers out there, and I think that in turn to can drive some of the decision making that's happening.
Right. And and those are great points. And it's interesting you mentioned HBCUs because somebody texted me a question. I guess they didn't want to use the question feature. Yeah, but they texted me a question, and that was, do HBCUs have a role in increasing technology, diversity in technology, and what can we do to, help drive that? Clearly, like you said, you've got just bright minds at HBCUs, and you said, it looks different than a job fair at MIT. But what can we do to support HBCUs with respect to fostering and developing that talent, or is it there? Am I just misstating that? Is it there already, or it's just not being recognized and utilized? So Gary, I'll start with you since you brought up HBCUs, but Marilyn, I know you have some real good thoughts on that too, because we talked about it before.
Yeah, I absolutely think the talent is there, without a doubt. I mean, because I know a lot of bright mind. I mean, even when you look at who's a real good friend of mine, the current the woman, or I'll call her esteemed woman, who's heading of Spelman, right? When you really start to look at some of the work that's being done, I'll tell you this: we were sending data for a data program, a data sciences program. We were sending data to Georgia Tech, and one of the biggest, and they were providing information on how the city could best improve in different areas. We took that same approach with Spelman, and the diversified opinions that came back from that set of data was completely different, and honestly much more well suited for what we were looking for. And that wasn't even a thought. It was just before. It just was something we decided to become intentional about as it relates to that. And I may be off your question a little bit, but at the same time, I will tell you the talent is there. And yes, HBCUs will always and have to continue to provide or do more. They're gonna. That's how to work, because we got to catch up. And you can't catch up by doing what everybody else is doing. You got to do more. But the talent exists. I mean, a wealth of just knowledgeable talent, and that's what I talked about. If you're not going to I sat in a Fortune 500 meeting with a company, and I'll be quiet after this, Roy, and they said we can't find any African American talent. Right? This is entry level jobs. Entry level jobs coming in with just a 4-year degree. And we talked about, well, where are you doing your recruiting at? They had not been to one HBCU to do recruiting at all. That was mandated by the board for them to go do that. The next thing you know, we have a flock of just African American talent piping in. And that's what I mean when I say just, and I think the HBCUs have to do everything that they can to make sure that companies, and especially those who know about them and are in senior leadership and are in VP positions, we have to push them towards that angle as well, because you'd be surprised how many of them never even set foot on a campus of an HBC university.
Wow. And I know, Marilyn, we're fortunate here in Atlanta in that we do have, just a wealth of HBCUs, some of the more preeminent ones in the country. And I'll leave it at that so I don't get into trouble. But, do they have a role? I mean, or what can we do? Not whether they have a role. That's too easy of a question. What are some of the things that corporate America can do? If you're listening on this call and you're in corporate America from Maryland, what are some of the things you can do to, foster or create those partnerships with HBCUs in your mind? I'm asking you to put your thinking cap on here.
I agree wholeheartedly with everything that's been said here. I think that, we've got to do a better job of bringing in talent from our HBCU institutions. We also have to, again, I go back to accountability. I sat in on a very interesting conversation with Microsoft, with Facebook, with Google, and a few others. And Microsoft is putting its money where its mouth is. They recognize that this is a problem. Their CEO has written an open letter to say that we've got to do better in terms of our initiatives, and they are putting together all kinds of initiatives right now to address the problem. They're putting innovation centers at our HBCUs. They're doing connectivity. So, I mean, there's just a lot of things that they're doing right now as a result of this conversation that happened. Because again, it's a systemic problem within our industry, is that we don't value the education level, or we don't value the input of people that come from HBCUs. I mean, it's a known problem, and I'm not going to sweep that under the rug. We'd much rather go to the MITs and the Georgia Techs and Stanfords of the world. But I would tell you the same level of and quality of education comes out of Tuskegee as well as North Carolina A&T from an engineering perspective. So they recognize that. And so now I see initiatives and partnerships that are coming into play in terms of utilizing those programs and those students in terms of initiatives. So there is a lot of work, like Gary said, to still be done in terms of addressing some of those underlying systemic habits. And we've just got to be more vocal about it, putting forward ideas and putting forward conversations around what we think could be the problem, because they're asking us and no one's really giving them initiatives and answers from a direct, or giving them direction in terms of here are the things that you can do. So I serve right now as a connector. I'm connecting the dots on a lot of these things in terms of introducing conversations. And I think that we need to do more of that. We need to find more people like that are willing to work with me to make those connections. And something that will open up a funnel or maybe a pipeline to that, and alleviate that question of we can't find talent, because it's certainly out there.
So Marilyn, now I'm not going to let you off the hook. If somebody wanted to work with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? Because I can foresee that a lot of people that are listening to this live or listening to it later on will say, hey, I do want to do that, because I think, we do have to take it from the theoretical to the practical. It's one thing to say, hey, look, we need to do this or we need to do that. And what you're saying is you're doing it. How can somebody get in touch with you to assist?
I'll be more than happy to share my contact information. It's MJ at UnderGrid Networks is my email address, or you can call me at 404-273-6894. We can have a good conversation there. I would tell you that I do need that. I do need those kind of channels, because I was talking to a GM at Amazon yesterday. Very same initiative, same thing. Now Amazon wants to throw all this money around their diversity and inclusion initiative, et cetera. So they're standing up another program. And I'm saying, unless you put the right people in there that maybe have even walked the walk or even understand it more so than just Joe Blow because he's on the fast track to the senior rankings, you're going to have the same problems. And so I think they're listening to me, and I would love to put recommendations forward in terms of how we, the things that they could do to make their program a lot more successful, and not just be something, that's pretty on paper and full of words.
Great stuff. So we're coming to the end of the hour. It's come up very quickly. I knew both of you are very passionate about this area and very vocal. And so I do appreciate the passion and you speaking up. But we're coming to the end of the hour. So I'm going to ask you all both for, one last big thought here, one last thought on, just this topic, and, let your passion come out. So Gary, I'm going to ask you to go first. One last big thought, and we're keep it to a couple of minutes.
Yeah, and I said this, and it sparked a huge discussion. I was in Virginia a few months ago before COVID, and I was on a diversity and inclusion panel, and one of the things that I've experienced that I got help to get in a lot of the places that that I've gotten to. I've had a lot of help, even getting into the school I got into. It was a call. Even going to IBM, I got help. One of the things that I've seen along the way is we have a lot, and this is just a message to the African American community and minorities. We have a lot of individuals who get into high positions and don't pull people up with them. I see, and I just want to leave that there. A lot of times we get in our ecosystem. We say, hey, we got our spot, and we want to just protect our spot, and we don't necessarily do enough to create that pathway for those who are behind us. And every single talk that I have with executives who are in my position, I'm always asking them, what are you doing, to help eliminate this issue? And if I don't hear the right words, I'm holding, we talk about accountability, I'm holding them accountable. You, just because you got here and you're happy and you're where you're at, doesn't mean you get to turn it off. You have a responsibility to bring others along the way. And guess what? Even if you don't bring, show them how to maneuver and get to where you got. And we need to do more of that. And a lot of times it's a competition. And even this is funny, it took me years, Roy, up until probably 6 years ago, that I found an African American mentor in my field who was sincere and really wanted to create open doors and find pathways for me. And that's critical. It is absolutely critical. And it's something that we don't talk about enough in some cases when I'm around, but it has to happen it has to be a part of this whole process as well.
A great final thought, and you are so right. You have to look back and bring people along, whether it's technology, law, whatever the field is. And you're absolutely correct. And also saying, we have to look at it as a responsibility. So I'm right there with you. Marilyn, one final big thought.
My thought is going to come from a different direction. And it's going to be more about where we are going with the fourth industrial revolution. I think that we have got to change our programs, all our systemic programs that we put in place around STEM, STEAM, et cetera. We need to change those programs to programs that are more reflective of making things and connecting things, because we're moving to more of a semantic world. We've had our success in the web world, but the world is kind of shifting over to things that are more semantic, which means that we've got to have more system thinking, more critical thinking, and it's going to be more cognitive. And that's not an easy skill set to develop. And so we've got to incorporate those aspects into all of this STEM and STEAM conversation that we're having, because, and like I said, we're cyclic, right? We came from a system of systems. We went through the web world, and now we're back into systems of systems. The car is going to be a system because it's going to be totally autonomous. Your house is going to be a system because it is going to be totally connected. You're going to have connected hospitals, connected roads. Everything is going to be connected. And so we're going to need the mindset and the skill set of individuals who know how to mastermind a cyber physical world. And so that's the train over here that's leaving the station. I think that a lot of our STEM programs are geared toward the caboose of a train that's not going anywhere. We've got to shift our mindset over to these things that are more leading edge and more emerging, and push those down to our younger students, because I witnessed, giving kids this much information about the IoT. They took that, and and their imaginations are unlimited, their capabilities are unlimited. And when they get that kind of exposure, it's just amazing to me the kind of things that they can create. And so we've got to create more avenues for them to do more cyber physical type things that are going to put them on this trajectory and maybe change some of our diversity and inclusion conversations.
Right. And, and it's funny because Wayne Gretzky, who, was one of the greatest of all time hockey players, somebody asked him once, why are you so good? And he said, I skate to where the puck is going to be and not where the puck is. And,
Right.
And a lot, that's what you're saying. We've got to, teach to where it will be and not where it is right now. And you're right. I think we always fall into that trap of teaching, fighting that last battle, and we've got to figure out what's in the future and teach to that. So with that, we're at the top of the hour. Two excellent, fantastic, great big thoughts from you, Gary, and from you, Marilyn. Appreciate all of your candor, appreciate all of your perspectives here. Thank you so much for doing this. And just a reminder, two things. One is that this is being recorded, so we'll put it out and shoot the link out for the recording so that you can listen to it again, or if you know somebody that really should be listening to this. And then secondly, just a reminder that again, this is the first of 4 kind of webinars that Adams and Reese is doing with respect to October and Cyber Month. So I hope you join us for the remaining 3. With that, thank you for joining today and take care. Gary,
Thank you.
Marilyn, thank you.
Thank you.